A Trip into the Darkness, Chapter 34. It had been one of the most stressful and exhausting months of Troy's existence. After the chat with the witch in New Orleans, he had wasted no time gathering his men and making a beeline for the border in Texas. Arriving in Mexico, the question of where to search to find her was a problem. Going from town to town, he and his men questioned the locals while looking for bodies drained of blood. He wished he would have demanded more information from that woman in her little shady shop. If she hadn't drugged him with strong herbs, he would have been able to think clearly and wouldn't have been left without answers. He spent weeks driving around Mexico while contemplating if he should go back to New Orleans to demand more answers from that witch. The fear of moving further away from Mallory and potentially losing her forever was the only thing that kept him from backtracking. He knew she was close, but she somehow kept slipping through his fingers. When some of his men reported back to him that they had spotted her in southern Mexico, Troy had called all his crew and had them move southward, informing them to start watching the southern border. He had gotten a couple of reports from the locals and had seen that the locals had seen a woman running around the streets. He had known in his gut that it was her. Troy was in the same city when a call informed him that one of his men was dead from a wooden bullet through the heart. He knew then that someone else had gotten to her first. Going to the street where his man had been killed, he found his body in the back alley of a nightclub. Troy had gone into the club to search for answers. After reviewing the night's video cameras, he saw his Mallory run through the club not even 5 minutes before his man was shot. As she opened the door and exited the club, he saw a man stand up from a booth and follow her outside. His heart had started to accelerate and his teeth had throbbed as he zoomed in on the tall, dark-haired male. Pausing it on his face, Troy wondered what the odds were that Andres Gaudino would find his pet running around the streets of Mexico and kidnap her. Fighting against his rage, he could see how it all gone down. Andres realizing who she was and taking her for his own for no other reason than spite. They had a nasty history. Gaudino was a drug slinger, responsible for bringing huge shipments of cocaine and marijuana into the States for many, many years. Troy had somehow gotten involved with Andres's business and received copious amounts of cash from helping smuggle drugs into the countries back in the day. In the 80s, Troy's business was starting to take off as narcotics became a popular commodity, and he didn't need competition with Gaudino and his illegal drugs. So, Troy had threatened the man and told him to stay out of the country. When Gaudino had simply laughed at Troy, he had taken it to the next level and worked to hype up the U.S. government to help Gaudino's filthy drugs stay out of the country. Unfortunately, even with stronger drug and border control, Andreas's product still somehow continues to find its way into the U.S. His product still floods the U.S. streets to this day. Learning that it was Gaudino that took her, Troy then had to figure out the exact location of Andres's island. He had known the man lived off the coast of Colombia somewhere. Getting to Colombia had taken 2 days of non-stop driving. Once he and his men were there, the next course of action was figuring out how to get her back from him. Andres Gaudino was a very powerful and old natural-born, and Troy wasn't an idiot. As much as he would have loved to get a boat and sail out to Gaudino's island, he did not have a death wish. He knew that Andres kept an experienced guard staff that monitored the ocean around them. Showing up to his home unannounced and without invitation would be like signing his own death certificate. Troy had been waiting on the coast of Colombia as he worked to put together a force to swarm the island. That was until he saw a boat coming from the direction of Andres's island from one of the video cameras he had installed the previous day. Watching the footage, he saw her jump out of the boat and into the water. She had escaped Gaudino, just like she had escaped him. The girl is a sneaky little mink, he thought as she climbed out of the water and approached the woods. He had immediately hurried over to the location where she'd be exiting the woods and waited. When he saw her run out and start walking towards him in town, he couldn't believe his luck. It was like she was offering herself to him on a silver platter. He had patiently stalked Mallory through the town until she crossed the street, and Troy had decided it was time to reclaim his lost prize. Stepping in front of her, he felt a moment of shock. She looked so healthy and beautiful. Her face was full and her eyes so clear, like looking into the abyss. He shouldn't have been surprised that she'd been feeding from Andres, but for some reason he was. Troy could smell the man on her like he was standing right beside her. When he grabbed her throat and her pull consumed him and set him on fire. His fangs had throbbed, and his throat was raspy. He had not had a drop of blood since she left him, and he was eager to sink his teeth into her soft flesh. Mallory had screamed and fought against him as he dragged her to the waiting black car with his driver inside. Opening the back passenger door with an arm that was not around her body, he shoved her into the seat and then grabbed her wrists. Reaching into his back pocket, he pulled out the handcuffs and secured them around her. Then, pushing her on her back, he pulled out another pair of cuffs and lashed them around her ankles. Mallory continued to fight and scream while he cuffed her, but he could tell the drugs were already starting to slow her down. Good, he thought as he pushed her further inside the car before slamming the door. Troy rocked around to the other side and got in, then told his driver to go. Mallory was struggling to try and sit up, so he reached over and pushed her into a seating position. Do not fucking touch me, Troy. You need to release me now. Troy wanted to smile at her demands. She hadn't lost her attitude in the last month that she had been missing. Where do you think you're going, Mallory? It's dangerous in these foreign countries, and that man who had you is not a good man, Troy stated, and then watched her bring her cuffed hands up to her face to rub her eyes. He could see her heart beating in her neck, and he wanted to lean in and take her warm substance. He didn't like the way she smelled, though. It was musky and tainted versus her natural aroma. He wondered if Gaudino had done more than just feed from her. He might not be a good man, but at least he didn't abuse me or force himself on me as you did, she told him, turning her head to stare out the window. Troy clenched his teeth and thought about what she said. He had not abused her. He had been gentle, he had thought. He remembered when he had left her hungry in the safe room and then forced her to beg for his blood. That was not forced. She had given in to his demands willingly. Granted, it had been after he taunted her with his free-flowing blood, but nonetheless she had enjoyed it. During her time with him, he had never sexually assaulted her. Troy felt a moment of disgust for himself that rape was where he drew the line. Continuing to look at her, he noticed the large necklace around her throat with diamonds and rubies reflecting the dim light. Looking at it closely, he could feel a mystical power humming in the unmistakable twang of malice. Reaching out a hand, he brushed his fingers on the thing, and it burned him. Hissing, he yanked his hand back. He could have sworn and he heard an ancient voice whisper in his head to release them before his bones were ground to powder. Glancing at his hand, there was a red whelp on his fingers that had grazed the magical necklace. Mallory looked at him and raised an eyebrow at his weird reaction. Where did you get that necklace, Mallory? He asked her as his hand continued to sting. A witch in New Orleans gave it to me, she stated with droopy eyes. She was fighting hard against the drugs, but he knew they had to be making her extremely sleepy. Troy bit the inside of his cheek. The witch had mentioned giving Mallory a talisman that would hide her pull from him and all those who tried to track her. However, he hadn't expected the talisman to be so powerful and evil. Why would she do that? He asked. To complete a task. You should let me go so I can continue what was started, she said, yawning, and closed her eyes. Troy looked back down at his hand to find the burn was still blistering versus healing. Perhaps they would stop back in at Monique's place on the way home, and Troy would have a serious talk with that witch. Tilda. Andres awoke on his bed with a killer headache. He felt like he had the worst hangover his entire immortal life as he sat up from the bed. Looking up, he found Kuro standing over him with an empty glass. Rubbing his hand on his face, he found it was wet. What's going on? Andres slurred his words as he looked around the empty bedroom and tried to remember what happened. They had been fixing to take a bath, but he couldn't feel her pull on his energy. Looking down, he found the journal he had given Mallory beside him. Picking it up, he wondered when she had given it to him. Your boat just left the dock about 5 minutes ago. I've been trying to get you up, but you were out cold. Hence the water on your face. Kuro replied to him in Spanish, and that's when he remembered the wine and the feeling that the world was going black around him. Shooting to his feet, he realized she had drugged him. Reaching out, he grabbed the bed frame to stabilize his swaying body. Did you send out a boat to follow her? He growled. Yes, sir. Nicholas and Juno are behind her, but their boat isn't as fast as yours. I have to find her, Andres stated as he took a step towards the door. Kuro reached out a hand and grabbed Andres' arm to help steady him. No offense, Andres, but I think you need some food or water or something before you try to chase her down. You're looking rough. Andres growled and moved out of the room towards the kitchen. He kept a hand on a wall to keep himself from falling over while his other hand gripped the journal. Stumbling to the fridge, he opened it and found a glass container of orange juice. Picking it up, he poured the juice into his mouth and chugged the sugary liquid until the glass was empty. Slamming the container on the floor, the glass shattered. She had left him. They had made passionate love together, and then she had looked him in the eye and lied about her intentions to run away. Then she drugged him and left him. A red haze danced around Andres' vision as he tried to calm the rage and despair building inside of him. He didn't have time to lose his temper. He had to get her back before something happened to her. It was the talisman that was driving her away. He had known the moment it brushed against him while he was inside of her that the thing was evil. It had whispered to him that he could not keep the girl because she was indebted to it. When he tried questioning Mallory about the necklace, she had gone stiff and defensive. He knew the thing had to be whispering to her and filling her head full of lies and bad intentions. Taking a deep breath, his head stopped pounding and he felt stable on his feet. Nothing a little OJ couldn't fix. He quickly opened the journal she left him and skimmed through the pages. He found beautiful poetry about love, passion, and light and darkness. It was very different from the other journal of hers that he had read against her will. When he got to the last page of her writing, he found a letter addressed to him. Andres, you have been a light in my darkness. You rescued me when I was completely lost and drowning. I will never be able to repay you for saving me, but now I must leave to finish what was started. I'm so sorry it had to end this way, but I will forever be grateful for the short time we shared together. Signed, Your Blue Eyes, Mallory. Grinding his aching teeth, he wanted to throw the book across the kitchen with all his might, but instead he carefully closed the journal and sat it down on the kitchen counter. He had to find her, and with that thought, he walked to the front door. Kiro and 2 of his other guards were already waiting for him. I pulled a boat around for you, and once you get to land, there's a car waiting. Nicholas and Juno are trying to follow her, but she got a good head start, Kiro informed him. Andres nodded as he made his way down the island to board the black boat. Once he was on it, he pulled out his phone and looked up the location of the cell phone he had given to her. Relief went through his body when he found that she had taken the phone with her. She was moving toward the shore of Colombia. Andres started the boat and followed her dot on the map. Pulling out a second phone, he started making calls to his connections in Colombia to ask them to watch out for his girl and to inform him if they saw anything. When one of the connections told him about the vampire gringos that had gotten into town yesterday, Andres' teeth started to ache. Troy had tracked her down. He knew he would. Andres had been patiently waiting for him to make his move. He hadn't anticipated Mallory to be the one to make the first move for him. He didn't have a doubt that Troy would have picked her up as soon as she got to land. The sleazy bastard would be waiting to pounce on her like the predator that he was. Andres worked to calm his breathing. If Troy hurt her again, he would kill that man. Consequences be damned. Troy Denhart would be a dead man. It had killed him not being able to know the extent of her trauma. The first night she had woken up from screaming had terrified him. He had thought someone had managed to break into the house and was torturing her in her bedroom. He had been out of his own bed and up the stairs into her room in a matter of seconds. Walking into her room, he had found her laying there screaming and begging whoever was hurting her to stop. Andres had wanted to get into bed and hold her, but was afraid he might scare her more, so he had started talking to her instead, asking her to wake up and promising her she was safe. She had been so distraught. When he came back to her room with a glass of water, he had almost lost his composure. Seeing her standing there in the pale moonlight and nothing else but the strip of black silk had made him instantly hard. He had wanted to go to her and wrap her in his arms and promise her the world. The second night she screamed, he had run to her bedroom to find both of her hands clawing at her throat as if she couldn't breathe. He had not been able to stop himself as he got into bed and took her in his arms. She had been shaking. After she woke up, she relaxed into his embrace, then crawled on his body to feed from him. It was pure bliss laying there, feeling her pull at his neck. It had been so hard for him to deny her when she tried to ride him, but he would not take advantage of her. She had been hurting. That first day, once she was off the plane, Mallory had asked if he planned to lock her into her room, and Andres had wanted to punch Troy in his pretty face. He could see that sleaze Denhart locking her away like she was nothing more than a possession. The fact that he had never seen her close a door behind her was another good indication of some of the trauma she had endured while in his care. Even when she came to his room to make love, she hadn't closed the bedroom door behind her. Andres' fist clenched around the wheel of the boat as he reminisced back on their time together. She had been so perfect as she seduced him in that outfit he had picked out for her. The heels in that dress showcased her lush body. He remembered when he was on top of her and the aching need to be inside of her while she fed, when she suddenly froze and released his neck. He could feel even the pull on her energy move away from him as fear went through her. He needed her to look at him then, needed her to remember that it was him who was touching her and not her tormentor from the past. When she opened her beautiful eyes and stared at him, he felt like the luckiest man in the world. Having her choose him to take her body again after whatever it was that she had suffered from in the past felt like a gift. That's when he decided to flip them over so she was on top. He needed her to understand that she was the one in control, and that anything that happened between them would be on her terms. Blinking his eyes, he forced the memory to disappear as he looked back at the phone with her location. Andre saw when she got to shore, but was confused when the dots stopped moving. He waited a few minutes, but the dots stayed still. He wondered if she was having second thoughts, or if she had decided to leave the phone in the boat. He had a feeling it was the latter. 5 minutes later, he got a call from Nicholas. "Kay," he barked into the phone as he continued to speed across the dark water. "We just got to the shore and found your boat, but it's empty. We're fixing to swim out to land so we can continue to track her." "Okay, I'm right behind you," Andres informed him before hanging up the phone and slipping it back into his pocket. 4 minutes later, he cruised up to the shore, finding the 2 boats drifting in the water. Andres' black boat was smaller and lighter than the other 2, and he was able to get closer to shore before it became wedged in the sand. Jumping out of the boat, water came up to his knees. Exiting the water, he could smell Nicholas and Juno's scent. Walking closer to the woods, he picked up Mallory's scent as well and followed it into the streets. As he ran, his phone started to ring, and he angrily ripped it out of his pocket. "What now?" he yelled at Nicholas. "We just tracked her to a gas station, and her scent disappeared. She must have jacked a car." Andres' heart sank as he feared the worst. Hanging up, he ran faster and was out of the trees and across the street to the gas station in a matter of minutes. Storming into the station, he went to the back room and kicked open the door to the office. Pulling up the video footage for the past 20 minutes, he searched until he found her on the recording. She was tall and sleek as she jogged across the street and into the parking lot. Moving out of the shadows was the blonde-haired tyrant. Troy quickly stepped in front of her and grabbed her around the neck before pulling her back into his chest. Seeing Troy's hands on her brought the red back to his vision. Andres wanted to strangle that motherfucker as he pushed her into a black car that had just pulled into the station. Andres paused the footage to read the license plate. He would have him tracked down within the hour. Standing up, Andres left the office and went back outside to start making some calls.